Hello Pokemon trainers! Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket video here on iStarly TV. And today I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to make a video discussing what I think is probably the most powerful card in the Space-Time Smackdown set. And, you know, I'm not going to really show gameplay here. I'm just going to kind of talk about it and have some images on the screen and stuff. But I thought it would be fun to have a little bit of a discussion and hopefully inspire some potential deck building ideas and things like that. So, without further ado, let's talk about what I think is, of course, in my opinion, the most powerful card from Space-Time Smackdown, and that is Magnezone from Genetic Apex. Okay, so obviously if you saw the thumbnail, you kind of have an idea where this is going. I do think Magnezone is the most powerful Pokemon, or the most powerful card from Space-Time Smackdown, and of course that's something that can be debated. I am aware that different criteria would inform different opinions, different ideas, and would suggest that different cards are better or worse. And of course, if you have an idea of what you think is the most powerful card from Space-Time Smackdown, let me know in the comments now that we've had several weeks with this set, but also a few like important tournaments, a few big tournaments, community-hosted tournaments and stuff like that. So Magnezone is, I think, the most powerful card because it's powerful, it does a lot of damage, and it's also very flexible. Now, when I first saw this card before the set came out, I completely overlooked it. I kind of probably just looked at it and looked away because it's a stage 2, and I kind of have a thing about stage 2s where I try not to play too many of them in my decks because, you know, sometimes you'll have a game where you draw the first, or the basic, but then you never see the stage 1, or you draw the stage 1 and the stage 2, but you never see the basic, right? So there's a lot that can go wrong with stage 2s, but when they're this powerful, it's pretty awesome. And as I kind of hinted at a little earlier, Magnezone is the reason that Magnezone works the way it does. And the funny thing is, you can actually play these Pokemon, Magnezone and Magnezone, in decks that are not even electric decks. You can play them in pretty much any deck in the meta. If you want to play a certain type, guess what? You can probably jam Magnezone, the Magnezone family, into your deck and do pretty well with it. So I have seen, of course, kind of the breakout deck right after the set came out was the Darkrai Magnezone deck with Druddigon, of course, and it only played Dark Energy so that you could put those energy on your Darkrai and use its ability. And then, of course, with Magneton's ability Volt Charge, you can put electric energy onto it without having electric energy in your deck. So when you build your deck, whatever type you're building, you can put the Magnezone family in your deck if you want, and you don't even need to play electric energy in your energy pool. And sometimes it's actually better not to, so you get to kind of set up two different types of Pokemon, and sometimes that can actually work really well because it allows you to cover weaknesses. So something you could do, I've actually seen a deck, and I hope to make a video about this, hopefully I'm not giving too much away here, but I saw a deck online that looked pretty awesome, which was Ninetales with Blaine and the Magnezone family. So it had, you know, Magnemite, Magneton, Magnezone, and then it had Vulpix and Ninetales in it with Blaine. So it only had fire energy, and so the game plan, of course, once again, is to put the fire energies on Vulpix, and then use Magneton's ability to put the electric energy on it, and then once you have enough electric energy, you can evolve it, and then your Magnezone is doing 110 damage. And you probably have multiple electric energy on it at that point, and of course Magnezone only requires you to discard one electric energy, and its attack requires electric, colorless, colorless. So for example, if you have your Magnezone with like 3 electric energy on it, you can use the attack, you discard an electric energy, you still have 2 electric energy, so the next turn, even if you do not have electric energies in your energy pool, you can put any of those, whatever energy onto Magnezone and still attack with it. So it's just very flexible and very powerful. 110 damage is really solid, and if you're pairing it with Pokemon that can kind of chip away at the enemy, you can definitely do a massive chunk of pretty much any EX Pokemon's health bar. And it has 140 HP itself, so it can sustain a lot of attacks from a lot of common Pokemon in the meta. And yeah, so I guess we'll just talk a little bit about kind of Pokemon that you can pair with this. I mean, like I said, you really can pair this with just about anything, and you're probably good to go. I actually featured, in my previous video, I featured a deck with Electivire and Magnezone, And that deck has worked surprisingly well for me. I've really enjoyed it and had a lot of success with it. You can pair it with, Ninetales. I think what you want to look for with this is just pairing it with not stage 2s. In my personal opinion, you don't want to put it with other stage 2 Pokemon. So you probably don't want to put it with like Rampardos or Charizard or whatever. I don't know. Of course, you could if you wanted to, but like I said, it just becomes a lot harder to hit the Magnezone on time and to hit the other stage 2 on time if you're doing it that way. But you could pair it in a water deck. I mean, this kind of sounds crazy, but you could go like Manaphy with like Palkia or something and then still play Magnezone in that deck. Again, the world is yours. You can kind of decide what you want. You can play Magnezone in like a Misty deck where you're playing like Articuno or something, and then you can put the Misties on Articuno and then use Magneton's ability to build that up, so you're just building up 2 things. I think in one of the tournaments where the Darkrai Magnezone deck broke out, there was a deck that was playing the Magnezone family and the Dragonite family, which when it works, it's pretty amazing, but of course, again, that is 2 stage 2 Pokemon. Yeah, so that can be a little awkward, but it's pretty funny because there are actually, I think there are 2 different Magnemite cards in the game right now. And which one you play is going to depend on what your deck composition looks like. So if you're playing a deck with electric energy, and probably with only electric, I guess it doesn't have to be only, but if you're playing a deck with electric energy, you can play the Magnemite from Genetic Apex because it is strictly better. When you put electric energy on it, it can do 20 damage for 1 energy, which is great, and it has 60 HP. The other Magnemite is from Space-Time Smackdown, and it also has 60 HP, but it only does 10 damage for a colorless energy. So if you are playing Magnezone in a deck with no electric energies, you do definitely want to play this one. And I think sometimes people can kind of get a little, for lack of a better word, greedy. I don't mean that like as an insult, but people can tend to get a little greedy with their energy bases. Like they're like, okay, I'm playing Magnezone in my deck. I'm also playing like water Pokemon in my deck, so I'm going to play water and electric energy. You don't really need to. Again, if you're playing Magnezone, if you're playing Magneton from Genetic Apex, you do not need to put electric energy in your deck, and it just makes your deck a lot smoother. Again, if your deck only has electric Pokemon, absolutely put electric energy in your deck. But if you're playing 2 types of Pokemon, with Magnezone, you do not need to put electric energy, and your deck ends up becoming a lot smoother for that. Other Pokemon that can be fun to pair with, obviously we've solved the Darkrai problem. I mean, Darkrai is a great Pokemon to pair it with. Any EX Pokemon that's a basic Pokemon, I think is great. I'm just now kind of brainstorming a deck with like Celebi and Executor EX with Magnezone. That might be a little too much to go off of, but that can also work. Just having strong EX Pokemon to back up your Magnezone sounds great. I've seen it in decks with like Hitmonlee and Marshadow and potentially even Lucario. So you can play it with fighting Pokemon, of course. And another deck that could be kind of fun is with Druddigon. So I've kind of brainstormed this. I might try to build this myself, but Druddigon requires fire and water energy. So you could build a deck with just Druddigon and just the Magnezone family, and maybe like a colorless basic Pokemon if you want, just for like more damage or more tanking. And then you can just put fire and water energy in your deck so that you can actually attack with Druddigon. So while you're setting up your Magnezones on the bench and you're stalling with Druddigon, you can actually start loading up energy on Druddigon and attack with it. Because Druddigon does 90 damage, which is pretty good, especially coupled with its Rough Skin ability. But typically, because Druddigon doesn't need to attack, like the main reason to play it is Rough Skin, people don't put fire or water energy in their deck. But in this deck with Magnezone, you wouldn't need to worry about which type of energy you have, because Magnezone can cover itself, or Magneton can cover itself, and then Druddigon can use the fire and water energy. Now, as far as trainers, I mean, this is also going to depend on what cards you're playing in the deck, what support you're playing with Magnezone. Giovanni is decent with Magnezone. I mean, honestly, as far as breakpoints are concerned, there are not too many Pokemon in this meta that have 120 HP. So in all honesty, because obviously Magnezone does 110 damage, and then with Giovanni it would do 120, but there's really nothing that has 120 HP. So honestly, you're not really looking for that breakpoint. So my point here is like Giovanni I don't think it's necessary in a Magnezone deck unless you're playing other Pokemon that also would benefit from the extra 10 damage to hit certain breakpoints and knock out certain Pokemon. Pikachu and Pachirisu are honestly not super common. So, you know, Pikachu used to be one of the best decks in the meta. I rarely ever see it anymore. I think the Pikachu deck is still okay, but I think a lot of people are just kind of favoring a lot of other stuff. You know, as far as basic EX Pokemon, Darkrai is probably just better, and it requires like no setup, whereas Pikachu requires a little bit of setup. Pachirisu also requires a little bit of setup, so I think people are playing them a little bit less. I mean, here's the thing. You can play Pikachu and play Magnezone in your Pikachu deck, so that's another possibility if you want to go that route too. But again, I don't think Pikachu is quite as common, so in my opinion, Giovanni is not super necessary in a Magnezone deck because it doesn't really give you super beneficial damage with that 110. Sabrina and Cyrus, I mean, those are good in just about any deck. Like, I don't think there's ever a world where it's going to depend again, but I think if you just play one Sabrina, one Cyrus in every deck, at least one of each, you're probably good to go for every deck. Like, they're both great cards, and they both have very unique cases where they're really, really good, and cases where they do just about nothing. So, you know, I think having 1-in-1 is pretty solid. Sure, if you're playing like Darkrai or you're playing like Greninja in your deck, maybe Cyrus is a little bit better for you. But once again, it's going to depend on your deck composition. But at the baseline, I think you should probably always have at least one copy of at least one of these cards in probably every deck. Then there's Leaf. You know, Leaf and X Speed are both pretty good. I think I would want to play Leaf in this type of Magnezone deck if you're also playing other Pokemon with more than one retreat cost. But if you're playing a lot of Pokemon that just have one retreat cost, I think X Speed is just fine. You know, obviously Magnezone's retreat cost is a little bit higher, and so you might think, oh, I would want to play Leaf. But if you're playing a lot of supporters in your deck, then, you know, fewer Leafs is better. It only has 2 retreat costs, Magnezone. So an X Speed is just fine. Like, if you X Speed, you know, then its retreat cost is just 1. So yeah, if you play a lot of if you play like Druddigon or other Pokemon with 2 retreat cost, Leaf is preferred. But if Magnezone's your only Pokemon with 2 retreat costs, then X Speed is fine. Dawn is also interesting in a Magnezone deck. I don't think Dawn is quite as useful in a Magnezone deck as in a lot of other decks because, once again, Magneton can sustain itself. And so if you're playing it in a deck with non-electric energy, I'm not really sure you need Dawn. But again, depending on what deck you're playing, it could impact that. The tools are good. Rocky Helmet, Giant Cape. Giant Cape's probably better unless you're playing like Skarmory or Pachirisu in your deck. So, you know, putting the tools on your Magnemite or Magneton is also super helpful depending on the situation. So the tools are never a bad thing, but, you know, as is always the case, we only have 20 cards to work with. And I think by default, Magnezone decks are going to be a little bit harder to find the tools to work with because you already have like 6 cards that you need to include from the start. And of course, that is Magnemite, Magneton, Magnezone. I think you definitely want 2 Magnemite, definitely 2 Magneton. I've seen decks with just 1 copy of Magnezone, and honestly, that could be fine as well. But that's either 5 or 6 cards that you need to start with, which means you only have 15 or 14 cards to work with at that point. And you're probably not going to play a deck with just the Magnetons or just the Magnemite family. So you're probably going to be playing other Pokemon, so that already takes up like 2 to 4 other slots in your deck. So again, by default, these Magnezone decks are a little bit more intensive with their resources because, again, you need to include 3 evolutionary lines or three separate pairs of cards, if that makes sense. Yeah, Potion is good. Pokeball, Professor's Research, these are cards that are always going to be good. What I've been doing in my Magnezone decks is playing 1 copy of Pokemon Communication and 1 copy of Pokeball, though. But that's another thing that you can kind of decide depending on your deck. I definitely think you want at least 1 Communication in any Magnezone deck. Once again, because it's a stage 2. So there's going to be situations where, again, you have Magnemite and Magnezone, but you don't have that Magneton, and maybe you have an extra Pokemon, like an extra Magnemite in hand, or maybe a Mew, or whatever Pokemon you're playing with it in your hand, and you really want to find that Magneton, so Pokemon Communication can help you dig towards that. And I mean, yeah, that was kind of like a loose breakdown. I hope this video was at least interesting or somewhat helpful. I mean, I know I kind of just talked through a lot of different things, but that's just kind of my thought process when I'm building decks, and again, I do think Magnezone is a really cool card, and I think it's a lot of fun the fact that it's an electric Pokemon, but you could put it in any deck. These Pokemon that can be placed in like any deck because they don't really require specific energy to attack are a lot of fun because you can just throw them in anything. You know, Mew EX, Yanmega EX, now Magnezone. You can put them in, again, just about any deck and just kind of go off with it. So while it's clear now that Magnezone is like a very good card, and in my opinion, the best card in the set, I think there's a lot of unexplored potential with it and with the cards in the set. So please leave a like and please subscribe for more Pokemon TCG Pocket videos, and also let me know in the comments how wrong I am, or if you agree, or if there's any crazy Magnezone combos that you've been trying out yourself. So thank you for watching, have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.